So I don't see Councillor Brogan at the moment. We have Councillor Archie Buchanan. Don't see Matthew Buchanan yet either. Apologies. We do have Matthew Buchanan. We have Councillors Cleachy. We have Councillor Convery. We have apologies from Councillor Cooper. We have Councillors Cowan, Cowie, Dewar, Faulkner, Councillor Ferguson Miller, Councillor Fulton. We have apologies from Councillor Gray, but we have Councillor Frame-Subban. And we have Councillor Mars present and Councillor McLachlan, Councillor Ray, Rob and Councillor Shearer. And we have a number of council officers present as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I go on to the first item, I'm going to say a few words because we've got an esteemed colleague who's attending today for the last time, Cameron Mitchell. Cameron's going to be retiring in May. Cameron has been a stalwart within the Housing and Technical Resource. He joined the council in 1995, I believe. Same time as myself. Does that make me a stalwart? Cameron has been an outstanding officer. He's very well liked by all members, as I can gather, at least, and particularly with the Tenants Participation Coordination Group, where Cameron has worked very closely with colleagues in that group. And so I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And from me, Cameron, I just want to thank you very much. You've been a fantastic officer to work with. You've always been extremely helpful, very polite, very courteous, and very able and willing to work with members. And I really, really do appreciate that. And I don't just mean from this particular committee, but in previous roles that I've held where I've worked alongside you, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So I would like to wish you all the very best in whatever you do next, and maybe take up golf. I don't know what you're going to do. Have you got anything you would like to say in response, Cameron?
Yes,
put you in your spot.
I'd be very brief and just say thanks very much, and I consider myself lucky to work for the council.
Thank you, Cameron. Okay, item number one is declarations of interest. Any declarations? Don't see any. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'll move that as a correct record.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments on the minutes? No. Item 3 on the agenda is minutes of the special meeting held on the 21st of January. I'll move that as a correct record.
I'll second that.
Any questions or comments? Don't see any. Thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda is monitoring items. It's Housing and Technical Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 25 to 26 and probable outturn, and that's excluding the HRA, pages 23 to 30. And Kathleen, please. Kathleen Gowrie.
Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide information on the actual expenditure against budget for the period the 1st of April to the 23rd of January 26, and also to provide a probable outturn forecast for the year to 31st of March 26. This is the 4th Revenue Monitoring Report to Committee for the financial year 25-26. At section 5.1, it notes that following the Council's formal probable outturn, the resource is forecasting a break-even position after a transfer to reserves of $123,000 for the first op accommodation within homelessness. Appendix A on page 26 details the key highlights by service for the resource. Appendices A to D provide the forecast for each service along with detailed variance explanations and proposed variants. I refer members back to section 2 of the report on page 23. Committee is asked to note the probable outturn forecast to 31st of March for break-even position and to approve the proposed budget variants.
Thank you. I was distracted there. Thank you very much, Kathleen. Any questions or comments? I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Item 5 on the agenda, Housing and Technical Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring 25-26, probable outturn, and that is the HRA. Again, Kathleen, please. Pages 31 to 34.
Again, this report is for the period covering the 1st of April 25 to 23rd of January, and also to provide a probable outturn forecast to 31st of March. At section 5.1, it notes that following the Council's formal probable outturn, The resource is forecast in a break-even position after a transfer from reserves of 4.363 million. Appendix A on page 33 provides further details of variance explanations and proposed variants. I refer members back to section 2 and they're asked to note the probable outturn forecast of a break-even position and to approve the proposed budget variance.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Any comments or questions? No. So we all agreed. Item 6 on the agenda is Housing and Technical Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 25 to 26, excluding the HRA. It's pages 35 to 38, and it's Graham Booth, please. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is our standard capital budget monitoring report for the general services. It's the fourth for this financial year on 25-26, and it reflects the budget and spend position to the 23rd of January, which is our accounting period 11. Section 5 details the financial implications, and at Section 5.1 we're noting the resources total capital programme for the year is 6.564 million, and there's been no change to this budget since the last report to committee. Appendix A on page 37 shows a full forecast spend for the year against the budget of 6.564 million, and for information also notes the actual expenditure to the 23rd of January of 3.112 million. I would then refer committee back to the recommendation in section 2 of the report that the Housing and Technical Resources General Services capital budget of 6.564 million and forecast spend of 6.564 million be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Any questions or comments? Don't see any. Thank you very much. Item 7 on the agenda, Housing and Technical Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 25-26, and that's the HRA, pages 39 to 42. And it's Kathleen again. Kathleen Gowrie, please.
Thanks, Chair. Again, this report covers the period of 1st of April to the 23rd of January 26. At section 5.1, it notes the Housing Capital Programme equals 87.740 million, with current estimates from the resource have identified an outturn of 85.940 and underspend of 1.8 million. At section 5.3, the report notes the good progress with the new build programme and that the planned acceleration of the housing investment programme did not materialise as planned. At 5.4, it details that offsetting this is an increase in the target number of buybacks. Details are provided in section 5.7 in relation to the 1.7 million funding to carry out single building assessments for 28 medium and high-rise buildings. Any of the funding not used in 25-26 will be carried forward to 26-27 to allow completion of the projects. The budget and the funding sources are detailed at Appendix 8 to this report on page 42. I refer members back to Section 2 of the report. The committee is asked to note the Housing and Technical Capital Programme of 87.740 million and forecast expenditure of 85.940.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Is there any questions or comments? Andrea Cowan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just briefly to say that I'm very pleased to see an increase in the target for the buybacks. I think that's a great way to spend any extra money that we find floating about anywhere. So yeah, really good news to see that. Delighted. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Stephen Gibson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and it's just to highlight something that I suppose is not in the report. What the report highlights, I think, is very, very good performance for a council. We're doing really well. We are developing new houses, bringing forward regeneration, creating jobs, and meeting targets year upon year. But what this report doesn't show you is something that what this report doesn't do is tell you about the story in relation to housing association spend. We've had a really good track record with housing associations for many years, good developing organisations with a good track record of bringing forward new housing. But we have seen a dip in that in recent years. Now, that could be for a combination of factors. It could be just increased construction costs. It could be the complexities associated with development, or it could just be the cost of borrowing. But we have seen a bit of a dip in housing association performance over previous years, and particularly in this year. And what this report doesn't do is tell you about what a great job the Council have done in bringing forward our own projects, accelerating our own programme, to making sure that where possible we're utilising that underspend and alleviating housing need, creating jobs and regenerating communities. So it's just something to point out. I mean, certainly we've enjoyed that good relationship with housing associations. We want that to continue. They're key partners for us moving forward. But it's just to highlight that, you know, in amongst all this, there's something hidden, and that's the fact that, you know, what we have managed to do is avoid a situation over previous years where we've had underspend and not been able to commit, not been able to spend, and we've managed to bring forward our own projects. I just wanted to highlight that, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's very good comments and very welcome and very true, and thank you very much for saying that, Stephen. And I don't see anyone else, so thank you very much. Item 8 on the agenda, Housing Technical Resources Workforce Monitoring, October to 31st of December 25. That's pages 43 to 50. And Eileen McPake, please. Eileen.
Thank you, Chair. So the report provides the committee with workforce monitor information for housing and technical resources, covering the period from the 1st of October to the 31st of December 2025. So section 4.1 covers the attendance statistics with the details in Appendix 1. The resource absence figure for December 2025 was 7.5%, which represents an increase of 0.3% to the previous month and is in line with the council-wide figure. And when compared to December 2024, this reflects an increase of 1.3%. Based on current trends, the projected annual average absence for the resource for 25-26 is 6.2%, compared to a council-wide figure of 6.1%. Managers continue to apply the maximising attendance policy and are supported by personnel colleagues to ensure that the appropriate case management and employee supports are put in place. Other key monitoring statistics are covered in section 4.2 to 4.4, with the details in Appendix 2. In relation to occupational health, there were 196 referrals during the period. There were 8 accidents or incidents recorded within the period. And during the reporting period, there was 8 disciplinary hearings, there was no appeals heard, no grievances were raised, and there was 1 dignity at work complaint that was recorded. Analysis of leavers is covered in section 4.5 with the details in Appendix 2A, and there were 10 leavers eligible for an exit interview, and of that 2 completed exit interviews. And finally, the staffing watch return is covered in section 5 and the details in Appendix 3. And as at the 13th of December 2025, staffing levels show an increase of 23 employees in post across the resource compared to September 2025. And I'm referring committee back to section 2 and request that the recommendation is that for committee to note the workforce monitoring information for housing and technical resources for the period of 1st of October to the 31st of December 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Is there any questions or comments? And I see Richard Lockhart online. Richard?
Thank you. Yes, I tell you just one set of figures which is interesting. Medical examinations. I'm looking at page, where are we? 47, okay. Medical examinations hugely up on the previous year. And the other number that's double is referrals to employee support officer. Now, I have no idea what incurs the referrals section, but it's interesting to look at how many medical examinations there are, and I wondered whether there's any reason behind all that.
Yeah, good observation. Eileen, would you care to address that, please?
Yeah, the increase in medical examinations and indeed employee support referrals correlates with the increase in absence that we're seeing, because if you look at the same period last year, the absence rate was 1.3% lower than it is now, so you would expect to see a subsequent increase in terms of occupational health referrals, whether that's through the employee support officer or indeed its occupational health referrals through to for a medical opinion. Just to be clear, in terms of the employee support officer, employees are referred automatically to the employee support officer if their absence is recorded as a psychological related absence. It doesn't necessarily mean that they then access support following that. It just means that they get contact from the employee support officer, who will signpost them appropriately, either onto our counselling service or check that they're maybe getting appropriate support through the NHS, through their GP, or in some circumstances they may well decline an offer of support at that time.
Good answer. And does that explain it to you, Richard? Is it that you can see the link between the two, last year to this year?
Thank you. I see the link, but what I'm interested in really is behind the numbers, why there's such a large increase, if you like, in medical examinations. And what's something different? Is something happened? Is it job related? Is it disease related, or is it something else? I just don't know. It just seems a very large discrepancy.
So
that's what I'm looking for.
The absence figures last year, as Eileen had suggested, are lower, they're higher in this term, hence the more need for the medical examinations. I think I'm right in saying that, Eileen?
That's the point I was making. I suppose the other thing that I would say as well is because you will be aware that we have had a more focused support in terms of maximising attendance, and I referred to the case management support that we're taking. That also means that there will be more cases that will be driven to get an occupational health referral to support any supports that are getting put in place, or indeed if you're moving towards ill health retirement, for example, then the occupational health is part of that in terms of the referral for that. I can't give any details in terms of a particular trend that's been seen, other than, as I say, it could be attributed to the increase in the number of employees that are absent, and in addition, the focus on terms of managing long-term absence will result in more occupational health referrals being made.
Richard, does that answer it for you?
Well, yes, okay, it sort of does. Okay, thank you.
At least people are getting to see a doctor who otherwise would need to wait for weeks on end to try and get an appointment at their GP. At least they're getting to see someone.
Oh, yeah, true enough.
Every cloud, eh? Okay, thank you, Richard. Any other questions? No, don't see any. Item 9 on the agenda is items for decision. It's housing allocation policy, local letting initiative to support council tenants living in larger size homes to downsize to a smaller property. That's pages 51 to 56. And I'm going to ask Sharon. Sharon Egan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. So the purpose of the report this morning is to seek approval for the introduction of a new local letting initiative to support council tenants living in larger council homes to downsize to a smaller property. So I'll take you through to the background. So within the local letting plan report that came to Housing and Technical Resources Committee on the 15th of March 2023, we noted there the benefits to support council tenants under occupying larger sized homes to move to a smaller property. The report confirmed that a proactive approach would be taken to support council tenants in these circumstances to downsize to a smaller property where they wish to do so. On the 10th of December 2025, a motion was passed by South Lanarkshire Council for the creation of an incentive scheme to support council tenants to downsize. This motion included the provision of financial or practical assistance to council tenants. The motion highlighted the national housing and homelessness emergency and the lack of larger-sized family homes required to meet the needs of housing for those across South Lanarkshire. So building upon the previous approach to supporting our tenants to downsize and the motion approved at full council in December 2025, this report sets out details of a proposed local letting initiative and arrangements therefore for implementation. So if I take you to section 4, the housing allocation policy, which as you'll be aware is currently under review, this recognises under occupancy as a housing need and awards a low level of points to tenants queued on the transfer list who are living in properties larger than their household requires. The under occupancy points available under the current policy reflect a low level of housing need and in general are not sufficient to prioritise for housing. Therefore, the approach undertaken since 2023 to encourage and support council tenants living in larger homes was based on awarding tenants priority for rehousing where appropriate. This approach was not publicised and no additional support beyond what would normally provide in terms of housing options was provided. It's intended that the new local letting initiative will replace the current approach and operate alongside the under occupancy provisions as set out in the current allocation policy. Section 4.4 details the qualifying criteria proposed for the new local letting initiative. so therefore being applicable to tenants across South Lanarkshire with a Scottish secure tenancy. Tenants that must live in the property have a minimum of 3 bedrooms, must be willing to move to either a 1 or 2 bedroom property, and in terms of the tenant's current property, the property is of a type and in a location where there is a shortage of supply and low turnover of housing and there is established demand. We also ask that the tenant must be reasonable in terms of their application preferences, which would enable an offer of housing to be made within a reasonable period of time. So at section 4.7, we detail the awarding priority for housing. So when the tenant meets the qualifying criteria, their housing application would be prioritised on the other category list. So this would be moving them from the current transfer list to the other category list. Applications queued on that list are considered to have a high level of priority for housing available under the current allocation policy. And the key aim of managing the application via other categories is to ensure that appropriate offer of housing can be made within a reasonable time frame. The local letting initiative will encourage and support tenants under occupying their home to downsize through the provision of a range of practical support and assistance. The range of practical support and assistance available under this initiative will be tailored to individual needs and circumstances of the tenant, and will also take account of any support that they receive provided by family members, friends or available through other agencies and organisations. At 4.10, whilst the motion proposed financial and practical assistance, such as the removal of household belongings and other features that could incur costs to the tenants, it is recognised that supporting tenants to downsize to properties that meet their needs and aspirations brings financial benefits to tenants by having that reduced rent charge and reduced utility and running costs for their home. It's also recognised that moving to a desirable home within areas of their choice also brings added benefits. Accordingly, it's recommended that while the assistance will be provided in kind, no further financial assistance would be provided as part of this initiative. At section 5, the next steps, so following committee approval, it is proposed that the local letting initiative will be incorporated in 2026-27 local letting plan, which are subject to a separate report presented to this committee. The proposed details for the initiative are set out in Appendix 1. Also, implementation of the initiative will take place from the 1st of July to allow time for processes and procedures to be developed and establish arrangements made for publicising this new initiative. Implementation will be closely monitored throughout the year and outcomes will be presented as part of our annual report to committee. Therefore, I'd like to take you back to the recommendations at section 2 and ask that the new local letting initiative to support council tenants living in larger council homes to downsize to smaller property be introduced from the 1st of July as approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Questions? Andrea Cowan.
Thanks. Thanks, Sharon, and thanks, Chair. You may recall that I brought the motion to full council back in December and that it passed unanimously. Unfortunately, in this report, I don't see any trace of that motion, and therefore our group have prepared an amendment which the clerk has. We have an amendment. Obviously, we were delighted when the downsizing initiative passed, as I said, unanimously, and we were looking forward to seeing how that would come through in today's report. So you can imagine how disappointed I am to see that there's just no detail from the motion within this report. The only change to current practice that I can see is that it's being formalised. These are practices that have been going on behind the scenes, so to speak, since I believe 2023. The only addition that I can see to the current practice is that people who are downsizing will be shifted from the general list to the other list for housing, which does give them some priority, and that's something that we welcome. The ask of the original motion, well, there were 3 asks really. One was that additional housing points be allocated for every under-occupied bedroom, again, just to help people to move quicker. And there was a package proposed of either financial or practical assistance. I take the point that when you move from a large home to a smaller home, there are some financial benefits to you as a tenant, lower utility bills, etc. But the main crux of the motion wasn't to save money for tenants. and it certainly wasn't to reward them in any way for moving, it was just to make that transition easier. And the outcome of that, I believe, would be a benefit to the council. This seems to be missed completely. I believe that if we can free up some of the 2,500 homes that are currently under-occupied, then it allows for movement within our housing list and ultimately will ease homelessness. And during a housing crisis, I feel that this is something that we should at least try, which is why I've come back with this amendment. So this amendment has these three asks. It asks that we provide additional housing allocation points for under-occupied bedrooms, and it asks that we even at least try a pilot scheme where we devise a scheme of either, I've suggested £500 to help people assist their move, or a package of help, especially for people who are elderly and perhaps don't know where to start with, you know, advising their utility suppliers that they're moving or changing their address at the bank, that sort of thing, which I feel that our housing staff would be very helpful with and you know, could assist with that. So as I say, that's the reason for the amendment. We're asking for a pilot scheme to be devised, including costings. I appreciate this is going to have to be funded and that it would need to be funded from the HRA. I appreciate that's difficult, but I do think that the overall benefit to the council will outweigh the cost. I would imagine that the whole scheme would cost less than buying one buyback. You know, it's in terms of the amount of money that the housing revenue account deals with. I think it's you know, it's not very much and worth trying. So I'm asking that we try this and that we have a report brought back to us in June with some costs and some practicalities prepared by the officers, and then we can make a decision as to whether this 12-month pilot scheme goes ahead or not. Thank you.
Okay, so you're making a motion here, proposing an amendment?
Yeah.
Andrea? Yeah. Okay, have you got a seconder?
Yep.
Colin?
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to second the amendment. As Andrea's very thoroughly outlined, this report almost completely dilutes the content of the motion passed unanimously at full council in December. So our amendment seeks to bring back the spirit of the original motion, and I would urge members to support the amendment. Thanks.
Right, thank you both very much. I've got just two things to say. First of all, there was mention, Andrea, I'm pretty sure Sharon did mention the council motion when she was speaking to the report. And the second thing I want to bring to your attention is a motion was agreed unanimously at the council not to make changes, but to ask the Housing and Technical Resources Committee to consider some of these proposals. They have been considered, and the report that you see in front of you today is the outcome of the response. And I've already moved I've already moved that we agree that this paper that does highlight some changes. It doesn't give everything that you'd asked for, but it doesn't matter. The council motion was only to bring a paper to the council. You don't make changes to the housing allocation policy at the council. These are made at the Housing Committee, which is what we're addressing at the moment. And I'm sorry that it's not addressing. Well, I'm not sorry actually, but it's unfortunate for you, I guess, that the things that you've asked for aren't in the committee report. But hey, that's democracy. The report's in front of us, and I've moved that motion. I've got a seconder. And if nobody's got anything else to say, we'll bring it to a vote. But I see you want to come back in, Andrea.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back and say that I appreciate that Sharon mentioned the motion. What my issue is that absolutely nothing of that motion appears in the papers. Nothing. The only change to the existing policy, which is low-key and just offers people the normal sort of housing support that they would get if they were applying for any move. The only addition is moving them to the others list, and that wasn't even an ask in the motion, while I welcome it. And so as far as I can see, to be perfectly frank, I feel that this motion was passed unanimously at council and council's wishes have been ignored. I'm not saying that everything in that motion was
I'm sorry,
set
I'm
in
sorry,
stone.
Andrea, I need to come in here. The council's wishes weren't ignored. I was one of the unanimous people who voted for your motion. Your motion passed unanimously. There was no objection to the motion for a paper to be brought to this committee, which has happened today. This paper wouldn't be on the agenda if it wasn't for your council motion.
Well, I don't see any report, anything referring to the motion apart from the fact that it happened. I don't see anything saying that we're not doing X, Y and Z because of this, or we are doing that, you know, and
Okay.
to me,
No, that's fine.
it's been ignored, and that's the reason that I've brought
Well,
the
I'm sorry you
amendment.
feel that way, but it's not been ignored. I'm sorry, it's not been ignored.
Well,
This
I think
paper
we'll
is, well,
just
you might,
disagree
you
on
can
that.
tell to your opinion, but this item's
Yep.
on the agenda today because of the council motion. Points have been raised. There's a detailed report in front of us that Sharon has eloquently addressed, and that is the motion. I've moved this paper. That is what we're dealing with at the moment, and it's in response. It is in response. We wouldn't be dealing with this item just now if it wasn't for the council motion.
Well,
The other motion that was passed on the day will be dealt with in the June committee. Okay. Is there any... Jean Kalikas?
Yeah, the motion that we agreed in December was for a downsizing incentive scheme. I'm not seeing any incentives in the paper that we're looking at today.
Okay, again, I don't have the detail of that motion in front of me. There was various points in the motion, and they've all been considered. Sharon, I'm going to ask you to respond to that, if you don't mind.
Morning. So in terms of the motion at December 25, we have taken the part around formalising the initiative. So therefore, applicants who would normally have sat on our transfer list have now, we're recognising that we want to promote this initiative, and we would therefore move them from the transfer list onto our other category list, which for councillors' background, other category list is a very low number of applications, so it allows us to prioritise applicants that way and move them quicker. So it allows us to target this group of tenants. However, there is no financial incentive included in the paper this morning, as what I've detailed there at 4.10. The offer that will be given in terms of the initiative is around housing options advice and housing support. Thank you.
Elise Frame.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'm just a bit astounded that after we came to full council, as you said, unanimously passed at full council, but when you're sitting in a committee and chairing a committee, I don't understand how you can then say you've moved a report without asking for any questions first. Should the questions not come before you move the report?
Okay. I reckon 31 years we've been doing that, as long as I can remember at least. The paper is in front of you. The recommendation is, it's there in front of us. I've moved the recommendation. It has been seconded. Whether we take questions before or after, it's kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
So
whether we move it, whether I make a motion prior to or after questions, it is irrelevant. Because I'm going to make I've made the motion, and I know why I've made the motion, because I agree with the paper. If you don't agree with the paper, Andrea has done what she's done, and she's proposed an amendment. That's how the democratic process works in the committee.
I just fail to understand if the democratic process works in the committee, why didn't it work in the full council then? You unanimously passed this amendment in the full council.
No, I didn't.
Did you not agree to that?
What we agreed at the full council was for the Housing and Technical Resources Committee to consider the content of the motion. And we have considered it. And we now have a report in front of us today that addresses what we feel, what the officials feel, is the right way forward. It doesn't do everything that's said in the motion, or as Andrea says, anything, but we considered it, and the motion, the paper is in front of us with the detail of the changes it proposed. I've moved it, it's been seconded. If you don't like it, you can vote against it, at least.
So where's the proof of the consideration then, Chair?
I'm not going to get into this dialogue. The process is what it is. I could ask the clerk to explain how a committee works if you wish.
No, I don't need to understand how that.
You don't need that. So I don't
was just
understand why you're
understanding. You
asking
said
me. I don't
that.
understand.
Sorry, Chair, you're interrupting.
No, I'm speaking. I'm the chair.
Right,
You're
so,
interrupting me. I'm trying to explain something to you. If you don't like the process, I'm sorry about that. But the process is what it is. The democratic process has worked since the council set up, and probably previous councils to that, and every other council around the country. I've made the motion, it's been seconded, there's an amendment, and that's been seconded, and there's plenty of time for questions and discussion. If you don't agree with the democratic process and how it works, I'm sorry, but you can take it up with the head of legal services if you like, but that's the process that we work to in the council, always have done. You get any other questions?
no, just move to a vote then, Chair, thanks.
Okay. Well, before we do that, I've got Janine Kalikis and Julia Mars.
Hi, Chair. So, not to be pedantic, but to go back to the original motion, Council instructs officers to prepare a report on the creation of a downsizing incentive scheme. Can you show me where in this motion there is an incentive being provided to tenants to downsize?
Margaret, where have we got? What page are you on?
Maybe Harrison will be awarded inappropriate.
Right. Where is it? I mean, I don't like this language of proof. I'm not going to provide proof. The paper's in front of you. The motion has been considered. The officer has addressed it. The head of housing has addressed it. And I'm moving it. Sharon, do you want to come back in?
Yes, so just to take back to the incentives available throughout the initiative, at 4.8, 4.9, we detail here that the local letting initiative will encourage and support tenants under occupying their home to downsize through the provision of a range of practical support and assistance. So, as detailed there at 4.9, that range of practical support and assistance available under the initiative will be tailored to the individual needs and circumstances of the tenant. So that will take account of any support that they're already receiving and what other housing support that we can provide and help them and support them to move. So just wanted to pull out that section there around what we are including as part of the incentive.
Thank you very much. Julia Mars.
Thank you, Chair. What I would say is there's been a fair bit of discussion in terms of the motion in front of us and the fact there is an amendment brought by the SNP group with a slight difference to the proposals being made. I would suggest, whilst we could discuss this at length and probably not agree with you, it would be helpful just to move to the vote.
Thank you very much. Couldn't agree more. So there is a motion that has been seconded. There is an amendment and that has been seconded. So we're going to go to the vote. I'll hand it over to the clerk.
Thanks, Chair. So just to confirm, we have a motion proposed by Councillor McLachlan, seconded by Councillor Cowie to approve the recommendation as detailed in the report. And we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Cowan, seconded by Councillor Dewar, and it's as detailed in the information that's been distributed to members. Will we start? Yeah. So I'm just going to start the vote. Looks as though we're just waiting on one more member voting. Okay, that's great. So we've got all votes now. I'm just going to stop the vote. So we have 13 members voted in favour of the motion, 11 for the amendment. Therefore, the motion is declared carried.
Thank you very much. Item 10 on the agenda is the housing allocation policy, local letting plans to 26 to 27, and that's pages 57 to 64. Cameron Mitchell, please.
The purpose of this report is noted at section 1.1 is to advise on progress against the 2025-26 letting targets and seek approval for the letting targets for 2026-27 and the local letting initiatives that are proposed for 2026-27. Taking to the background at section 3.3.1 to 3.3 set out the background and purpose of local letting plans. Section 3.2 confirms that local letting plans are published annually for each housing management area, detailing the annual letting targets for mainstream and sheltered properties and the letting initiatives operating within the council's area. Section 4 specifically highlights the important role which setting targets plays in terms of delivering the requirement of the actions that were detailed in the homelessness strategic plan. And that's kind of why that's got that point of emphasis there. Section 5, progress against the current year's letting targets is summarised in this section with projected outcomes for both mainstream and sheltered properties detailed in Appendices 1 and Appendix 2. Section 5.3 highlights that the urgent housing need list are projected to exceed target across South Lanarkshire, which I don't think will be a surprise to any member and reflects the persistently high levels of demand we have from homeless households. Lets the waiting list are expected to fall below target. Lets the transfer and other categories list are, however, projected to remain within target. Section 5.4 relates to sheltered housing and indicates that the proportion of lets to urgent housing need in other categories and sheltered are expected to meet the target levels that have been set. The lets to waiting list are projected to exceed target, and lets to transfer list expected to be below target. The variances reflect the small numbers involved in the turnover in different places in terms of sheltered housing and the difference between supply and demand in the different areas. Section 6.1 notes that the letting targets proposed for mainstream properties across South Lanarkshire and for each of the 4 housing management divisions. And these are set out in full in Appendix 1. At 6.2, the report notes the range of factors, including, as mentioned earlier, the continuing high level of demand for housing, particularly for homeless households, which have been taken account in setting the proposed targets for each of the local letting plan areas. Section 7 notes the continuing high level demand for sheltered housing and highlights the letting targets proposed for sheltered properties across South Lanarkshire, which are detailed again in full at Appendix 2. Section 8.1 covers the role and the purpose of the local letting initiatives within the allocation policy to address particular needs, issues or circumstances. At 8.2, the report notes there are currently 6 local letting initiatives in place in South Lanarkshire, which are detailed in full in Appendix 3. It's proposed that all 6 local letting initiatives set out in the appendix will be retained during 2026-2027. And 8.3 references a separate report which we've just considered. It was just considered at today's committee report, which has approved the establishment of a further local letting initiative to encourage tenants in larger sized homes to downsize to a smaller property. If I can take you back to the recommendations in section 2, it is, at 2.1, committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that progress against the targets in the previous year be noted, that the 2026-27 mainstream letting targets attached Appendix 1 be approved, that the 2026-27 sheltered housing letting targets attached Appendix 2 be approved, and finally that the local letting initiatives attached as Appendix 3 be approved. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Cameron. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? I don't see any. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Asylum and Refugee Settlement Funding, pages 65 to 68, and I'm going to ask Sharon Egan to take us through that. Sharon, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report this morning is to request approval to convert 10 temporary housing officer posts into permanent housing officer posts within our staffing establishment. And this is in response to sustained service demand linked to asylum and refugee related pressures, which will utilise existing asylum and refugee resettlement funding reserves. So just to touch on the background at section 3, sustained levels of asylum dispersal and refugee resettlement continue to increase demand on our refugee and homelessness services across housing services. In addition to the resettlement activity, asylum dispersal has now been rolled out across the whole of Scotland, including South Lanarkshire. This includes locally one hotel managed by Mears, which is the Home Office's delivery partner, as well as an increasing number of self-contained dispersed units across South Lanarkshire. We've seen additional out-of-area homeless presentations following positive asylum decisions. These are increasing. We are currently seeing at least 5 presentations a week across South Lanarkshire, and a growing number of presentations with no prior connection to South Lanarkshire following their post-asylum decision. This is applying pressure on our temporary accommodation. It's significantly intensified, with hotel placements rising due to demand exceeding their available local capacity. This was reported as part of our Housing Emergency Declaration to Housing and Technical Resources Committee in June 2024. So reports both to Housing and Technical Resources Committee and Executive Committee continue to highlight the pressures within our service. The current level of activity remains consistent, therefore staff managing caseloads and attempting to prevent homelessness where possible, and they're required to support transition from asylum accommodation and maintain a statutory compliance. To address these issues, the Council had taken a phased approach to increasing our staffing resources. So in August 23, we created 5 temporary housing officers for 23 months, and then in February 24, again due to more increased demand in the service, there was a creation of a further 5 temporary housing officers. So the proposal at section 4 is detailed to convert these 10 temporary posts into permanent posts. This will use our available resources in response to additional service demands relating to the increase in asylum and refugee related housing need and the overall housing emergency. Converting these posts, we believe, is essential to manage ongoing asylum and refugee related housing pressures and to protect our statutory homelessness services. Adequate dedicated funding is available, making these posts permanent. There will be stability, recruitment and retention. The request takes account of the trajectory of demand and available financial resource, as well as the priority to recruit and retain appropriately skilled and qualified housing professionals. Therefore, approval is sought to appoint all additional posts on a permanent basis. Section 5 details the employee implications, so sets out salaries and grades. And at section 6, the financial implications. The annual cost of making these 10 posts permanent is £0.431 million, and that this will be funded on an ongoing basis through the asylum and refugee funding provided by the Scottish and UK Government. If government funding is no longer available, or if asylum and refugee resettlement services are no longer required, staff in permanent posts will be transferred to suitable vacancies across our establishment. Therefore, I take us back to section 2 of the report, to the recommendations, and ask that approval is provided to utilise the asylum and refugee funding reserves to convert 10 temporary housing officer posts to permanent housing officer posts within the housing services establishment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I very much welcome this report and I'll move accordingly.
I will second it.
I've got Janine Keelikis. Janine?
Hi, I just wanted to get a wee bit of clarity around the work of the housing officers. So is it the case that they're required not solely for refugee and asylum, but also due to general homelessness?
Sharon?
Thanks, Councillor Keelikis. So to explain, there is a mix of work involved. So we have seen over 120 homeless applications year to date, which is from individuals that have came through the asylum and refugee route. So that's applied that additional pressure across our services. But also in terms of that, so it's then when they present as homeless, it's supporting those individuals into temporary accommodation and then onto their permanent accommodation. So it's that journey. But we're continuing to see that continual throughput, as I've mentioned there in the report, that at least 5 presentations a week, and we're seeing a number of refugees migrating into Scotland as well, because our homelessness legislation allows for individuals to seek that homelessness status. So it's continuing that support, so we're definitely seeing that growth. So it is homelessness tasks that they will be carrying out, but it's to support that core population. Thank you.
Okay for you, Janine? Yeah, thank you very much. Andrea?
Thanks, thanks, Sharon. Can I just ask, you're saying that sort of roughly 5 presentations a week from asylum, migration connected people. How many roughly do we get of homeless? I feel like I'm going to say normal homeless, but that, you know what I mean. How many roughly per week do we get from the general population as opposed to the asylum population? Just so that I can see what sort of percentage that's making up. Thanks.
Sharon?
So currently at the minute we're receiving approximately 60 homeless applications a week. So that will include the whole homelessness population, including those who are asylum and refugee. So within that we're seeing at least 5 presentations from that.
Excellent. So that's just confirmation that they are still a small number, and that the work and the pressure that's applied to the council through homelessness is not solely coming from asylum seekers, is really the point that I'm trying to get to.
No, we're still seeing, and I've got a paper this morning, we're still seeing sustained high levels of homelessness presentations across our population. This is just an added pressure.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Andrea, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that, because there is a bit of a misconception. We often have to deal with that, but it's a good question and well answered, Sharon. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions, so moving on to the next item. Number 12, Canderhaven Care Home Community Asset Transfer to Smile Children's Charity, and it's a SKIO, so that's pages 69 to 74. And Jeremy McParlin, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise the committee of the request for the lease of the former Canderhaven Care Home to Smile Children's Charity under community asset transfer, and seek approval to the principal terms and conditions set out in section 5 of the report. The care home was formerly a residential home operated by social work. However, following a review of their services, a decision was made at the meeting of the South Lanarkshire Council Integrated Joint Board on 26th of March to close the facility. As part of the surplus property process, the availability of the property was included in the property bulletin and circulated to the resources within the council and its community partners. And in completion of this exercise, there were no expressions of interest received. Smile Children's Charity subsequently submitted a CAT application for the lease of the property, which was received and validated in October 2025, with a decision in the matter required by 3rd of April 2026 in line with legislation. Public consultation was undertaken, with 20 supporting comments and 1 neutral comment being received. And it's noted that the applicant had undertaken their own community consultation exercise in early 2025, with over 2,000 supporting comments being received at that time. A community benefit assessment was carried out by the Community Asset Transfer Working Group in December 2025, which gave a score of 100%, indicating the community benefit was deemed excellent. This request was then considered by the CAT assessment panel on the 19th of December, where it was recognised that the applicant organisation's vision was ambitious and, if successful, would offer a much-needed service to residents throughout the South Lanarkshire area. It is recognised that the organisation has made significant progress in obtaining support and financial backing. However, also noted that there remains a need for additional substantial funding to be obtained to make the project fully viable. And it was agreed that the merit of the application, coupled with the early progress, should lead to the application being recommended and giving the opportunity to obtain the lease and fully develop. The property itself was built in 1987 and comprises a purpose-built residential care home. The site shown in the attached plan extends to 4,208 square metres or thereby. In addition to the building, there is a 14-space car park at the rear and 6-space car park at the main entrance, as well as some secure gardens and landscaping areas. The accommodation comprises 47 single occupancy rooms, 4 units with a lounge and dining facilities in each, and there's a large communal dining area on the ground floor and passenger lifts accessing the upper floors. The organisation is a registered SKIO, having registered this entity on February 2024, and it's existed since that time, formed for the public benefit of the community of Scotland with the purposes of the provision of recreational facilities or the organisation of recreational activities and the relief of those in need and advancement of health. The organisation currently operates 2 successful charity shops in Larkhall and Hamilton, which were intended to provide a stable basis for the organisation to gather income until such time as a viable premises became available. The aim is to develop this facility into a hub for young people suffering from complex needs from throughout the authority's operational area. The organisation is engaged and sought support from both local and national elected representatives. And Property Services confirmed that if the property were to be let commercially, the potential annual rental value would be in the order of £65,000. However, it should be noted that the location and design would have some impact on demand and there would be limited anticipated demand for the property. As stated, a community benefit assessment was carried out and the rating of excellent equates to a 100% discount of the rent. And it's therefore recommended that the subjects be leased to Smile Children's Charity and I refer members back to paragraph 2 of the report and ask that the subjects at Candraven Care Home, Queen Street, Stonehouse, be leased to Smile Children's Charity, subject to the terms and conditions outlined in section 5, and that the Executive Director, in conjunction with the Head of Administration and Legal Services, be authorised to conclude the lease in the best interests of the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
And Elise Frame.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I just want to come in support of this CAT transfer. I think it's an absolutely fantastic opportunity for South Lanarkshire to get this and this based in South Lanarkshire. I know the Smile Charity. I've been to charity shops a couple of times. I've saw the footage of the film that they've put out of what the building will look like once it's done, and the job prospects bringing to Stonehouse is fantastic as well. And I think just bringing the ASN children in, it's somewhere that can be used by schools locally as well. So I think it's going to be a great local amenity for everyone, and I would completely support this and hope everyone supports this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Elise. Agree with that. Don't see anyone else. Okay. Moving on to the next item, item 12 on the agenda, 15 on the agenda, is Cooter, not Coulter, Cooter. Cooter Community Hall Community Asset Transfer to Cooter Community Trust. That's pages 75 to 80, and it's Jerry McParland. Please, Jerry.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is contained in pages 75 to 79. Is to advise the committee of the request for the disposal of Cooter Community Hall to Cooter Community Trust under CAT and seek approval to the principal terms and conditions as set out in section 5 of the report. The hall was previously managed by South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. However, following a review of its business plan, the board announced in March 24 that it couldn't sustain service delivery from this facility, and control was returned to the council. Subsequently, an annual lease of the property to the Community Trust was approved by delegated powers with a date of entry of 14th of November 2024. The Community Group have submitted a request for the community asset transfer of the hall by sale, the validation date for which was the 23rd of September, with a decision required by the 23rd of March 2026. Public consultation was undertaken with no comments or objections being submitted. But again, the applicant had previously undertaken a community consultation exercise which provided evidence of substantial support for the transfer by the local community. A community benefit assessment was carried out by the Asset Transfer Working Group, which gave a score of 76%, indicating the community benefit was considered very good. The request was then considered by the Community Asset Transfer Assessment Panel, and it was recognised that the applicant's organisation appeared to have a sustainable plan to develop and operate the venue. The property extends to 150 square metres with a main hall which is suitable for a wide range of activities, of events and an adjoining kitchen. And there's an adjacent car park that has space for around 25 vehicles. The organisation is a registered SCIO, and it was formed for the public benefit of the community of Cooter for the purposes including the advancement of citizenship and community development and the provision of recreational facilities with the aim of improving the conditions of life for the users. Having successfully operated the facility during the concessionary lease, the proposal is for the group to continue to occupy, use and maintain the building in the longer term. The property is suitable for the proposed use, and the applicant has shown capacity to initiate and grow services within this and also another facility in which they are involved. The disposal will enable the community group to continue to operate the facility and remove all future property liabilities from the council in terms of maintenance. In addition, the sale will allow the club to pursue external funding for further development. The council has no alternative operational requirement for the property, and the risks of the transfer are considered low as the property is an existing established community hall. In addition, the status of the organisation as a SCIO limits any risk of commercial gain by a subsequent sale. Within their asset transfer request, the Trust requested a 100% discount on the jointly agreed independent valuation. But as the price to be paid reflects both community benefit and the requirement to seek best value in the disposal of a council asset, a discount of 80% of the unrestricted market value is recommended, which is consistent with previous sales transactions for properties of a similar nature. An independent valuation was carried out by Graham and Sibbald surveyors, which provided an indicative market value of £35,000, which results in a purchase price of £7,000. and it's therefore recommended that the subjects be sold to Cooter Community Trust, and I refer members to the recommendations in paragraph 2 of the report, and ask that the subjects at Cooter Community Hall and adjacent car park be sold to the Trust subject to the terms and conditions outlined in section 5 of the report, and that the Executive Director, in conjunction with the Head of Administration and Legal Services, be authorised to conclude all matters in respect of the sale. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. It's now an hour since we started, so, sorry. Blackburn, Alan Faulkner.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a general question. I've no objection to the 2 cats here, but we passed the cat at a previous meeting, which is my ward for the ASN, and my understanding is there's a problem with the legal. Is there normally a delay in the legal work process?
Once the cat's passed, we instruct legal, and depending on whether it's a sale or a lease, there's obviously negotiations and agreement to reached on the final terms of it. If you can give me the specifics of the case, I can certainly come back to you on where it's at with legal. I can liaise with our legal colleagues. Thank you.
To me. Thanks, Alan. Okay, so as I was saying, it's now an hour since we started, so I'm proposing a 10-minute eye break for the BSL users. So see you all back here just less than 10 minutes at 11:10. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your patience while I was discussing with colleagues. The next item on the agenda is item 14, Policy and Strategy Review Schedule, and that's pages 81 to 84, and it's Cameron Mitchell for the very last time. Cameron.
Emotional. So this is not one to be emotional way, but the purpose of the report detailed at section 1.1 is to seek approval for the Policy and Strategy Review Schedule for Housing and Technical Resources. Section 3 explains the schedule is reviewed annually and reported annually to the Housing and Technical Resources Committee, with the most recent schedule approved at committee on 27th November 2024. Section 3.2 highlights that the review schedule supports the systematic service development and improvement within the resource, setting clear timescales for reviewing key policies and strategies, and supports also the development of the annual customer involvement work plan. Section 4.1 of the report provides an outline of the content of the policy and strategy review schedule, which is itself attached to Appendix 1. The schedule it sets out the details of each policy and strategy that's covered by the schedule, the frequency of review, and when reviews are next scheduled to take place. Section 4.3 and 4.4 in the report summarise the scope of the policies and strategies which are covered by the schedule. Section 5, in terms of this next step, Section 5.1 of the report highlights that the content of the schedule will, as appropriate, be reflected in the resource and service plans for 2026-2027, and will also be used to establish a joint programme for customer engagement. I would highlight Section 5.3, which confirms that the Housing and Technical Resources Committee will continue to be updated fully and separately in relation to the development of the specific policies and strategies contained within the schedule. Going back to Section 2, in the report where the committee is asked to approve the following. Firstly, that the policy and strategy review schedule attached to Appendix 1 be approved, and secondly, that, as noted, the outcome of policy and strategy reviews be reported to future committees in line with the schedule. Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second it.
And any questions or comments? None. Okay, thank you very much again, Cameron, for all your service. Next item on the agenda is number 15, additional one-off investments from the Council budget 26-27. I'm going to ask Jonathan Reid to speak to that, and it's 85 to 89.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning all. So the purpose of this report is to provide an overview of the additional one-off investments allocated to the resource from the South Lanarkshire Council budget for 2026-27. Recommendations are set out in Section 2, namely that these additional one-off investments from the budget for next year be noted, that the additional energy efficiency improvement projects to be progressed within the Central Energy Efficiency Fund, or CEF as it's more commonly known, be approved, and that the monitoring and reporting arrangements for these also be noted. Section 3 provides the background, with the budget for 2026-27 concluded last month. And within this, the one-off awards of funding across different resources to enable enhancements for existing services and budget provisions totalling £33 million. An allocation of £1.5 million was made to the Housing and Technical Resources for this purpose, and for the purpose of improving the energy efficiency of the Council's non-domestic estate, and also general improvements to the Council's housing estate. Section 4 covers the non-domestic element, which is going to be used to boost the existing Central Energy Efficiency Fund. This fund has been running for many years, started in 2005, and has resulted in over £7 million of improvements into the Council's non-domestic assets, leading to significant reductions in not only the running costs for these, but the emissions that are coming from them as well. And at 4.2, we set out examples of types of projects that have been delivered through the fund to date. As a result of the additional one-off investment from next year's budget, an additional £1 million will be available to the CEF fund over the course of 2026-27 and 2027-28. Colleagues in Property Services from this have developed a programme of works that they believe will make a big difference to the properties that we have, and these have been set out in Section 4.5, comprising of a range of PV installations across schools, leisure facilities and corporate assets, along with LED lighting enhancements and building energy management system upgrades as well. Progress in relation to the CEF programme itself is reported to this committee as part of the resource plan, as well as to the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee as part of other reports. Section 5 of this report moves on to the estate improvement budget, which covers our domestic element of the additional funding that we're aiming to get from the Council's budget. This is coordinated by Housing Services and it is usually, historically, is around £40,000 to £80,000 a year, and it's allocated evenly across each of the 4 housing divisions, and it's done so in alignment with the Council's participatory budgeting approach, in that we engage with tenants, we engage with other customers to find out what they would like us to spend this money on, and it delivers a lot of small-scale projects across each of the divisions. We've set out a couple of examples of these types of things that are done with this budget at section 5.3. From next year's budget, however, there's obviously that one-off investment of £500,000, which significantly increases the funding that's available through this. We are, of course, however, keen to continue the approach that we have, the established approach that we have for allocating this funding, and we work with tenants and other customers to do so. But in addition, looking to maximise the funding that's been made available, we're looking at the Housing Investment Programme as well to see what projects that are sitting on that could potentially be brought forward into next year to allow them to be progressed with the funding as it's become available. Progress in relation to this is usually reported to area committees on an annual basis, and we'll continue to do that, with summary updates also provided to this committee and other committees as part of other reports. However, due to the additional funds being allocated, we are keen to come back to this committee in June to tell you exactly what we would like to spend that money on, and working with tenants to do that. Finally, moving on to next steps. These are set out in section 6, and namely advising that property services, subject to approval, will progress the assessment and feasibility of energy efficient improvement projects through the SEEF programme for the Council's non-domestic estate, and that housing services will commence a review of the HIP and considering the priority estate improvement projects with the additional funding, and work with tenants to come up with a list of what we'd like to spend that money on. I draw committee's attention back to the recommendations of section 2, in that the additional funding be noted, and the SEEF projects identified at 4.5 be approved to progress, and that the monitoring and reporting arrangements set out in the report be noted. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Okay, questions. David Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Very well, thanks.
It's
always very loud when the first person comes in to speak.
All right. Sorry, Chair. I'd just like to thank Jonathan for that very welcome report. It's always good to see investment in council facilities and the estates round about our tenants' properties. The only question I could ask is, were mini turbines considered for perhaps schools or even the building that you're sitting in, Chair, which, as you know, can be very windy round about Almada Street? Were mini turbines considered as an option? Thank you.
Jonathan.
Thanks, Councillor Shearer, for your question. So I understand they are being considered around different things that certain different budget lines. They weren't for this particular batch of funding. You'll see that there's a timescale on when this is to be delivered by, and it's looking, as SEEF always does, for those quick wins to try and improve the buildings as quickly as possible and generate the savings. But they are being looked at, and we do have an energy demand reduction plan that goes along to Climate Change and Sustainability Committee later on this year. And we'll look to try and bring something like that in to say, okay, well, what can we do in terms of energy generation more than we're doing just with the solar PVs? But no, not for this particular batch of funding.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
I do take your point. It is extremely windy around here. When you've got a taller building, it catches the wind at higher level that you don't feel at the ground, then it causes that kind of vortex feeling at the bottom of the building. So, good question, David. Kirsten Robb.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Morning, everyone. Very quickly, to welcome this investment on both sides of things, SEEF and estate management as well. I think that will make a difference on the finances, saving money on the emissions, and to our tenants and residents as well. So, all good. Quick question on the SEEF programme as a whole, the ones that are not funded by this extra funding. When can you remind me again, Jonathan, please, when we hear about the programme for 2026-27, SEEF programme as a whole?
Okay.
Thank you.
Jonathan.
Thanks, Councillor Robb. Yes, so that's under development. So I suppose it's a good point in itself that in addition to this additional funding, we're continuing to run with the normal programme. So I understand from discussion with colleagues this morning in property that is being prepared and certainly be announced in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
That's great, thanks. And really good to see the energy management stuff as well, because it's so important to know what the buildings are doing, because that can pick up a lot of opportunities to save funding as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No other questions? So moving on to items for noting. Item 16, it's the homeless pressures update. Sharon Egan, and it's pages 91 to 96. Sharon?
Thanks, Chair. So, as David has noted there, this paper is for noting, but we felt it was appropriate to come back to committee and just quickly summarise it, just given the significant prominence that homelessness has had to us here at South Lanarkshire, but also the national focus. So just there at section 3, in terms of the background, as you'll be aware, in June 2024 we declared the housing emergency, and since then we've continued to ensure that regular updates are brought along to committee. Also, in turn with that, a range of mitigations had been incorporated and were refreshed into our homelessness strategic action plan for 24 and 25. Those mitigations continued to progress during 25-26, and performance was monitored on a regular basis. So we continue to work closely with the Scottish Government in relation to the housing emergency and our homelessness figures, and the national plan to help address Scotland's housing emergency was published back in September, and we've continued to work alongside collaboratively to provide examples of where good practice has taken place, and we're continuing to contribute that with the Scottish Government. If I take you to 3.7, given the ongoing pressures in the homelessness service, including the costs above budget provision to meet the temporary accommodation demand, as you're aware, we continue to focus on increasing our supply of appropriate, good quality and temporary accommodation. And just to touch on that, as I'm conscious this committee is well aware that we've got 2 new temporary accommodation projects that received executive committee approval and represent a significant and positive development in our response to the housing emergency. So our new supported temporary accommodation service, which will be at Harriet Gardens in Rutherglen, which is in partnership with Social Bite, will provide 15 purpose-designed accommodation units, and our second development of new first stop temporary accommodation at the former Clydesdale Hotel will provide an additional 15. So these developments sit alongside wider mitigations and are a key component to our long-term approach to stabilising the homelessness system and improving outcomes for our households. If I take you to section 4, in terms of our performance monitoring, we just wanted to note there within the table, you will see it's really positive in terms of where our homelessness presentations are stabilising, and we've had a reduction of 9.28% from the previous year. That reduction is also reflected in the number of homeless decisions that we are then making. However, just to draw attention to, we still have an extremely high caseload there at the end of Q3 of 1,477, which is no longer double to where we were a few years back, but it's still significantly high, and that's having an impact on our time taken to case close and discharge of duty into secure accommodation, which you'll see is 286 days. So the key concern continues to be the sustained demand for homelessness assistance, including the temporary accommodation. So just to take you back to section 5, in terms of next steps, in order just to keep committee updated. So we will continue to closely monitor performance, and progress will continue to be reported as agreed on a 6-monthly basis here at Housing Committee. So the next update will be for September 2026. The 30 additional units of temporary accommodation will be introduced in the new financial year and will facilitate an exit from hotel use and improve our overall system flow. And the authority's long-standing partnership to approach homelessness prevention continues, with particularly strong collaboration with our health and social care partners. And this includes a focus in developing our prevention opportunities as connected to the new Housing Act 2025. So work is underway to develop a new homelessness strategic action plan for 26-27. This is in collaboration with a broad range of partners, including health and social care, our third sector organisations and our registered social landlords. And this strengthened partnership approach will ensure the new annual plan aligns fully with both national and local priorities, particularly the shift towards a whole systems approach to preventing homelessness. Our plan will build on our previous achievements and support the new forthcoming Ask and Act duties, which is to be progressed as part of the new Act. This updated strategic action plan will be presented to Housing and Technical Committee for approval in June 2026. therefore take you back to section 2, and it's just to the scale and nature of the continued high demand for housing and homelessness assistance, both nationally and locally is noted, and that the impact of the mitigated actions as set out in the current strategic plan is noted, and that the arrangements in place to deliver additional temporary accommodation units for 26-27 is also noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And I've got Kirsten Robb. Kirsten?
Thanks very much again, and commend all the staff for all the action they're taking to address homelessness. I wanted to ask about maximising all the tools in the box. I know we've got 1,400 empty homes across South Lanarkshire, and this may have been covered before I joined the committee, but it was to ask for future updates. Could they cover what we're doing just now to bring more temporary housing, empty housing back into use, and if there's anything else we can do from national best practice or anything to see what other investments we could make to try and get more of those empty homes into use? Thank you.
Sharon?
Thanks, Councillor Robb. So yeah, absolutely. We have an empty homes officer who sits within our strategy and support team and continuously works alongside owners or people that own these empty properties to try and bring them back into use. That's a key priority for us, and we've excelled in our target each year. So we're looking at that again for the new financial year. Thank you.
It's something that's raised its head in my own ward, Kirsten, and it's really quite frustrating when you see that there's a good property there, and for lots of varying different reasons, the owners maybe have inherited a property and they live abroad or something like that. And it was something, there was a workshop at the recent COSLA conference. There was quite a good discussion took place there as well. So it is a problem that I think, but as Sharon has highlighted, we've got a homeless, an empty homes officer dealing with that, and I'd like to see things moving better, but we're stuck a lot with the legalities of it and ownership and things like that. Anyway, good question, Kirsten. Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else. Item 17 on the agenda, Housing Scotland Act 2025, survey of local authority housing departments relating to financial memorandum costs for homelessness prevention measures, 97 to 106, and that's Sharon again, please.
Yep, it's a long title. So again, this paper is just for noting, but we thought it was important to highlight. So in terms of the background here, at section 3, the Housing Scotland Bill became an act on the 6th of November 2025. There were over 1,000 amendments lodged over various stages of the bill. Only Part 7 of the Act, which relates to any of the technical provisions, will come into force immediately. Many of the other provisions will require secondary legislation. So some of the straightforward provisions will come into force ahead of the dissolution of Parliament in spring, but more complex provisions, such as where the secondary legislation is required, are planned for later dates. And timescales for implementation are therefore unclear at this stage. However, a long stop date has been included in the legislation for the Ask and Act provisions to commence by December 2028. So a full report on the specific provisions of the Act will be provided to Housing and Technical Committee in June 26. However, just to note that on the 20th of November 2025, to inform the future implementation of the homeless prevention aspects of the new Act, which is the Ask and Act, the Scottish Government issued a survey to individual local authority housing departments designed to test the assumptions used within the financial memorandum. So section 4, this states out more information in terms of the financial memorandum. So the Ending Homelessness Together action plan set out within the Scottish Government's approach to end homelessness in Scotland. These prevention measures set out within the new Act provide a legislative framework for the introduction of the new Ask and Act legislation and creates a shared public responsibility to prevent homelessness, as well as increasing the period for threatened with homelessness, which is currently 56 days, but that will increase from that 2-month period to 6 months for local authority assessments. So the Scottish Government believes that these earlier intervention measures and these shared responsibilities to preventing homelessness will help people avoid crisis situations that often have wider and longer term impacts. So section 4.4, we note there the Scottish Government acknowledges that the measures set out in the Act have associated costs, and therefore the purposes of the Bill's financial memorandum, they've developed a cost model in order to produce a set of estimate costs across the various bodies affected by these new duties. So in order to quality assure the model, the Scottish Government issued a survey asking local authority housing departments to review each of these elements of the costings and the approaches taken to see if these assumptions would reflect our expectations. The survey has contained 9 questions, which primarily focused on local authority housing departments' duties in terms of the new Homelessness Act, and at Appendix 1 provides a full response to each of our survey questions. And to summarise these, the Council generally supports the impact assessment approach, but notes that the Askin Act legislation introduces new and untested responsibilities. There's comparisons with the duty to refer, which applies in England, which are not appropriate due to our differing legislative context, and analysis therefore is slightly underestimating caseloads and costs. And we also note within the survey that the proposed response notes areas of concern for the Council in the context of particular challenges around extreme pressure on homelessness and housing services locally and the national housing emergency. So the prospect of further increase in demand without the equivalent enhanced resource is noted within our response to the survey. Therefore, taking you back to section 2, it's just to note that the Council's response to the Act in terms of the financial memorandum costs for homeless prevention measures, as detailed at Appendix 1, is noted.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And I don't see any questions. Norman Ray.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's really more of a comment than a question. Seeing obviously the Council's responses to the 9 questions, there's quite a lot of areas of where concerns are raised, which I suppose makes me hope that is taken account of, and I presume other councils will be putting in similar responses, because I mean it does give me concerns that it could turn out to be one of these things where a higher level of government has a sort of good idea, good intention, but doesn't sort of fully appreciate what the implications are for local government actually putting that into practice. So hopefully they will take account of these things, because you do get these situations where something sort of ends up being a bit of a mess once it actually happens. So hopefully that won't be the case with this, and it will work out successfully. Thanks.
Thanks, Nora. Okay. The next 2 items are also for noting, but I'm proposing to move these 2 items on block, if we're minded to agree with that. Any? All agreed? Okay. Thank you very much for your attendance, and the next meeting is in June. What date? Doesn't matter. We'll get notified of that. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Bye-bye.